The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
There is no greater title that history can bestow than that of peacemaker. During his first term as president, President Donald Trump forged the historic Abraham Accords, which achieved peace between Israel, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Lebanon. Now, in his historic second term, he has forged peace between India and Pakistan, Serbia and Kosovo, the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, ending a particularly long and bloody war. He achieved a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia, also achieving a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and, of course, the historic ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Now he stands on the cusp of perhaps his greatest achievement in the name of peace, an end to the bloody conflict between Ukraine and Russia. But the nattering nabobs of negativism in the mainstream media, particularly CNN and MSNBC, are desperate to scuttle any peace agreement. They jumped the gun by saying that President Trump made concessions to Russian strongman Vladimir Putin when there's no evidence to support that claim. They also challenged Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, to reveal on air at MSNBC what concessions had been made, and he chewed them out, pointing out that you don't negotiate for peace in public. Perhaps the folks over at MSNBC should go read a copy of President Donald Trump's book, The Art of the Deal. There's nobody worse than Nicole Wallace, but that figures. She is a deep state mouthpiece, having worked previously for George W. Bush, who brought us the historic and baseless war on Iraq, based on the false claim that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and that Iraq had played some role in the attack on America on 9/11. The folks at CNN are embarrassing in their obviousness. Now, some will say that, well, Roger Stone doesn't like CNN because, based on their incisive investigative reporting, they just happened to be 25 feet from his front door at 6 o'clock in the morning when he was arrested in the fake Russian collusion hoax. In fact, I was arrested at 6:00. We now know that to lie under oath in your voluntary testimony before Congress about Russian collusion that never actually happened. And with the recent declassification of documents by Tulsi Gabbard, it's now clear that there was no online hack of the Democrat National Committee to lie about. In fact, the FBI admitted in my trial they'd never inspected the servers, and that claim is based on a secret report by a third-party IT firm called CrowdStrikes. In fact, the head of CrowdStrikes, a man named Sean Henry, who just happens to have been a deputy to Robert Mueller, who will soon face seditious conspiracy charges, testified before the House Intelligence Committee, the same committee I testified, under oath that he actually had no proof of an online hack. There is no evidence of an online hack. So I find the actions of CNN despicable, as probably the greatest president in my lifetime valiantly fights to achieve a historic peace. Just days after President Trump met in Alaska with Vladimir Putin, incredibly, Susan Rice, the national security advisor to Hillary Clinton, the woman who lied about the deaths of 4 Americans at Benghazi when she claimed that there was a spontaneous uprising of people in Libya storming our embassy, when in fact there was a precision military attack on our embassy, which they clearly had a floor plan. They knew where the safe room was. It ended up in the tragic and violent death of 4 Americans, including the violent violation of our U.S. ambassador. This woman lies with a straight face and with impunity. She actually claimed that Vladimir Putin planted a bug in President Donald Trump's limousine, also known as the Beast. She says this with no evidence or proof whatsoever. It's just another lie. But then Susan Rice was in the room on July 2nd, 2017, when the entire Russian collusion hoax was planned by President Barack Obama. So like Robert Mueller, who I think will probably seek an insanity plea because he's non compos mentis, was during the investigation, certainly is today, Susan Rice, I think, will soon be facing charges. But it's just a perfect example of the permanent establishment, the deep state, once referred to by President Dwight Eisenhower as the military-industrial complex, desperation and frantic attempts to scuttle this peace agreement. Why would they do so? Well, war is incredibly profitable for some people, like defense contractors, those who want to continue to money launder, or those who want to continue to traffic children. Ukraine is a center for both. Then, of course, there are the kickbacks and the skims from the literally billions of dollars that American taxpayers have provided for this endless foreign war. Now, just days after President Trump held the historic peace summit with Putin in Alaska, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, arrived with a host of European leaders in Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump. Now, why Zelensky wears a proper suit and tie when he's speaking to the World Economic Forum, but he can't wear a suit and tie when he meets with the President of the United States, and he can't wear a suit and tie when he addresses a joint session of Congress, really irks me. See, I think it is disrespectful. But I recognize that his all-black garb, kind of like the Ukrainian Johnny Cash, it's a costume. Reminds me when Fidel Castro would show up in fatigues. He's playing a role. And in fact, Zelensky is a former actor, comedian, although I never found him terribly funny. I think he is paid by the moneyed interests in Ukraine to play the role of president. It seems, however, that the meeting today went much better, with President Trump and Zelensky seeming to get along much better than they did the last time, when Zelensky was coached by various people, including Susan Rice, including the Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, all three of them coaching Zelensky prior to his meeting with Trump not to accept any peace deal, which I personally believe is a violation of the Logan Act and is prosecutable. You see, you can't have your own private foreign policy. President Trump said after the meeting, we can work a deal where we're working on a peace deal that they are fighting. They have to fight. I wish they would stop. I'd like them to stop, but strategically that would be a disadvantage for one side or the other. President Trump said that Russia is now indicating that they are willing to allow security guarantees for Ukraine moving forward. President Trump also said that Ukraine has no business being a member of NATO. In fact, for them to formally join NATO would be a violation of two agreements the United States formally entered into, the Budapest Memorandum and then the Minsk Accords. You see, when East and West Germany were reunified and the Russians agreed to that, we in turn agreed not to push Ukraine into NATO, which really is defined as not mounting missiles or bioweapons labs on the ground to the detriment of Russia. It's really not different than the situation in 1962 when Nikita Khrushchev put Russian ICBM missiles on the ground in Havana, Cuba, 90 miles from the shore of the United States. The president did say that Ukraine would need to formally cede Crimea to the Russians for peace, although the Russians already control Crimea. They took it from Ukraine back when Barack Obama was president. Trump is now using his deal-making prowess to make the best out of a very bad situation that was created by the Obama and then the Biden regimes. This has been a long and ugly process, but President Trump will be successful, in my opinion, bringing the end to a war, just like he's been successful in countless other places throughout the second term of his presidency. I was honored this morning when the president reposted my tweet, I guess you'd call it my X posting, in which I cited his many achievements for peace, India and Pakistan, the ceasefire between Israel and Iran, Serbia and Kosovo, Congo and Rwanda, Thailand and Cambodia, Armenia and Azerbaijan. And I pushed back against those deep state villains who would really like to scuttle the peace process. Meanwhile, First Lady Melania Trump also made an appeal to Putin in a letter she released. She said, in today's world, some children are forced to carry a quiet laughter untouched by the darkness around them, a silent defiance against the forces that could potentially claim their future. In protecting the innocence of these children, you will do more than serve Russia alone. You, sir, will serve humanity itself. Such a bold idea transcends all human division, and you, Mr. Putin, are fit to implement this vision with the stroke of a pen. A heartfelt appeal from the First Lady. Now that Trump and Putin are on the same page, it does put huge pressure on Zelensky and his European allies, who are anxious to have us to continue to pay for the war, but not willing to pay their share of that obligation. The American people are fed up. They are tired of this war, and they want to turn off the spigot of unaccountable money, and they don't want to keep provoking Russia for the free ride that Ukraine is getting. They can no longer hide behind the United States because I think the jig is up. President Donald Trump will not allow the U.S. taxpayers to be bilked any further or played like the suckers they have played us. Peace will happen regardless of Zelensky's tantrums or being propped up by the Europeans, who are basically saying, why don't you and he fight? It's the oldest trick in the book. If just tuning in, this is Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Later on in the program, we're going to talk about election integrity because President Donald Trump had a major announcement yesterday about doing away with mail-in ballots, questioning the integrity of electronic voting machines. And Joe Hoft is going to join us. Joe Hoft, formerly the Gateway Pundit, now reporting there as well as on his own, is going to talk to us about the election integrity issue and what President Trump meant when he spoke about this. But that's a little later in the program. In the meantime, you're in the Stone Zone. Stay in the zone. Whatever you do, don't touch that dial because we'll be back with more first-rate political coverage.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Buying a car shouldn't eat up your week. That's why Carvana made it convenient. Car buying that fits around your life, not the other way around. You can get pre-qualified for an auto loan in just a couple of minutes and browse thousands of quality car options, all within your terms, all online, all on your schedule. Turn car buying into a few clicks and not a full week's endeavor. Finance and buy your car at your convenience on Carvana. Financing subject to credit approval. Additional terms and conditions may apply.
The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox is on Hulu. In 2007, Amanda Knox was studying abroad in Italy. She had no idea her dream would turn into a nightmare. Inspired by the actual events of her wrongful conviction and 15-year fight for freedom, watch the new Hulu original series, The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox. Now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Hellmann's believes they can turn any mayo hater into a lover. So, if you know someone who thinks mayo equals bland, show their taste buds the truth and challenge them to try Hellmann's flavored mayo. With irresistible flavors like Hellmann's spicy mayo, garlic aioli, chipotle, and Italian herb, they'll be eating their words. Challenge haters to try Hellmann's flavored mayo and get them to eat their words. Learn more at hellmanns.com/eatyourwords.
Now at Chipotle, our all-new Chipotle Honey Chicken brings Chipotle heat with a touch of sweet. Seared smoked peppers and savory Mexican spices, blended with a hint of pure honey for a perfectly balanced sauce. All combined with fresh, tender chicken hot off the grill, served up in your favorite burrito or bowl. New Chipotle Honey Chicken takes heat and sweet to a whole new level. But it's only at Chipotle for a limited time. Order now in the app for pickup or delivery. Chipotle, for real.
I'm Roger Stone, and you're in the zone on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Abu Musa, a city councilman in the Muslim American-dominated city of Hamtramck, Michigan, was caught stuffing the ballot box shortly before a primary election earlier this month. Footage has emerged of Massa being driven to a ballot box where he handed piles of ballots to the driver, who then stuffed them into the insecure drop box in violation of state law. Now, Massa won his re-election spot on August 5th, receiving 1,129 votes and beating out 11 other competitors. But only 286 of Massa's votes came on Election Day, while 843 of his votes were cast by absentee or mail-in ballots. So without the mail-in vote boost, Massa would have placed fifth in the election. Two other Hamtramck City Council members were recently arraigned over election fraud changes in 2023. Massa has currently not yet been charged. I think this underscores President Trump's point that mail-in ballots open the door for fraud. Actually, former Attorney General Bill Barr recently caught red-handed trying to set me up on January 6th, even though any claim that I knew about, participated in, or condoned any illegal activity on January 6th is categorically false, and there is no evidence to support that claim. But there was a time when Barr actually went on CNN and said that mail-in ballots were an open invitation for fraud. Who knows how many people like Massa in Michigan are committing fraud with absentee ballots? Some may not be as blatant or reckless as he was, but they certainly cheating and getting away with it, as mail-in ballots make it extremely difficult to root out fraud. I believe they must be banned immediately, and we must return to one-day voting with supervised hand counts. President Donald Trump clearly agrees, because today he was on Truth Social, where he announced his vision for free and fair elections. President Trump said, "I'm going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots, and also, while we're at it, the highly inaccurate, very expensive, and seriously controversial electronic voting machines, which cost 10 times more than accurate and sophisticated watermark paper, which is faster, leaves no doubt, at the end of the evening as to who won and who lost in any given election." Well, Joe Hoft, who joins us momentarily, knows all about this. He's written 3 books on election integrity. Volume 1, Setting the Stage. Volume 2, The Impossible Occurs. And Volume 3, The Cover-Up. He's going to talk to us about all of that. If France can count 38 paper ballots in one evening, then surely the United States can do the same thing. President Trump emphatically stated his firm opposition to mail-in voting. It was the mail-in ballots that showed up in the dead of the night, all simultaneously at 3 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, many of these ballots without a crevice or crease in them, as polling centers throughout Democrat-run cities on election night of 2020 racked up these huge, from-nowhere margins for Joe Biden. Do I believe Joe Biden got 81 million votes? No, I don't. Do I believe that on average he ran 20% ahead of where Barack Obama, a historic figure, ran in dominant African-American precincts? No, I do not. So the president's right. It's time for a structural reform so elections will make cheating much more difficult for Democrats and the deep state usurpers, because it'll only be a matter of time before they try it again. Stay with us, because Joe Hoft, who is an expert on election integrity, will join us to talk about the challenge that lies ahead. You're in the Stone Zone. Stay in the zone.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Nearly home. Isn't home where we all want to be? Reba here for Realtor.com, the pros' #1 most trusted app. A dream home isn't a dream home if it comes with a nightmare commute. That's why Realtor.com has Real Commute, so you can search by drive time. Download the Realtor.com app today, cause you're nearly home. Make it real with Realtor.com.
Pros' #1 most trusted app, based on August 2024 proprietary survey.
This episode is brought to you by Dogfish Head Craft Brewery. The Grateful Dead and Dogfish Head have gotten the band back together with the release of Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale, a light-bodied pale ale brewed with sustainable Kernza grains, granola, and heaps of good karma for a refreshing brew that's music to your taste buds. Available nationwide. Visit dogfish.com to find Grateful Dead Juicy Pale Ale in your neck of the woods. Dogfish Head Craft Brewery is located in Milton, Delaware. Please drink responsibly.
Discover Ralph's Club New York, the new fragrance by Ralph Lauren. With blackcurrant, vanilla, and sandalwood, this scent embodies the sensuality and confidence of Usher. Like the city that never sleeps, this masculine fragrance lasts for 12 hours. Ralph's Club New York. Ralph Lauren. Shop now at Macy's.com.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. From streaming to shopping, Prime helps you get more out of your passions. So whether you're a fan of true crime or prefer a nail-biting novel from time to time, with services like Prime Video, Amazon Music, and fast free delivery, Prime makes it easy to get more out of whatever you're into or getting into. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to learn more.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. On Saturday, August 9th, I was honored, along with my good friend and great American patriot, General Michael Flynn, and the greatest mayor in the history of the city of New York, Rudy Giuliani, by the Gateway Pundit in a conference in Las Vegas, in which we celebrated our vindication based on the recent declassification of documents by that valiant patriot, Tulsi Gabbard, who serves as the Director of National Intelligence. I was honored by Jim Hoft and Joe Hoft of the Gateway Pundit. Joe Hoft publishes at joehoft.com. He is a brilliant investigative reporter, a stout conservative, and a very good friend of mine. And we're honored to have him with us today. Joe, welcome into the Stone Zone.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here, Roger. Thanks for having me.
What a great experience in Las Vegas. Great patriots, great people, a great celebration of redemption and vindication. Just a great time to be with you and Jim. I know that you had to be as excited as I was when you woke up this morning and saw that President Trump had said that he's going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in ballots. And while we're at it, also get rid of the highly inaccurate, expensive, and seriously controversial electronic voting machines, which the president correctly pointed cost 10 times more than accurate, sophisticated watermark paper ballots. He correctly said that paper ballots are safer and they would leave no doubt at the end of the election evening as to who won and who lost. You have written a terrific 3-volume set of books on election integrity. It's called The Steele Collection. Folks, you can go to Joe Hoft, that's H-O-F-T, joehoft.com to order these amazing books. And I want to go through this because the 2020 election in the United States will go down as one of the most significant and darkest periods in U.S. history. The winner would, of course, take control over our $22 trillion economy, a $5 trillion budget, and the leadership of the free world. President Trump, a billionaire who, despite constant harassment attacks from the Democrats, members of his own party, big media, big tech, and foreign entities, was very popular, and his base was highly motivated. His opponent was a failing old man who was actually too sick to openly campaign, Joe Biden. Yet they expect us to believe that Joe Biden won. Joe, what really happened on Election Day in 2020?
Well, Roger, thanks again. Thanks so much for having me, and for all your listeners. Just know that you're listening to one of the greatest men in American history. I think you, Rudy, and General Flynn will go down in history as great, great Americans, and maybe not just of the modern era, but of all time. And the hell that they put you guys through, like so many people that we had this past weekend there in Las Vegas, were just it was outrageous. It was a communist fascist actions against the innocent, and we had so many people there. There was actually 10 days ago or so in Vegas that shared their stories, and they're brilliant people, some of the best in America that were targeted by this regime. And you stand tall now, and we were so honored to have you there, Roger. I get goosebumps as you're sharing some of this stuff. Literally, I got them that weekend. It was just a thrilling experience for everybody there. It was more than just listening to speakers. It was much more than that. And when I asked you if you'd come and get an award alongside Rudy and Flynn, you didn't flinch. It was a snap of the finger, I'm coming. And same with Flynn and same with Rudy. You guys were all there for each other. I think that's what it was all about. It was this camaraderie, this love for each other, and this vindication. We won and then Flynn, as he shared and you shared, it's time now to fight. And it was just to be a part of that was just humbling and a great moment in my lifetime, and so thrilled to be there with you. It's as far as all that's going on this morning, I woke up to that news too, and I was like, right on. Thank the Lord Jesus. We've been heard, and there's so many people across this country over the last 4 or 5 years that fought, that spent their own time and resources, thousands of people to stand up and say this wasn't right. And at the Gateway Pundit, we were writing after the election at the Gateway Pundit, Jim and I, story after story after story saying this. Our efforts were so hard at the beginning, right after the election, even though we were exhausted leading up to the election with our reporting, pushing for President Trump. Because we love this guy, and we know that he's the best for America. He proved it again today, and but it was shocking when we saw what happened, and we kept writing stories, hoping that our efforts will help to overthrow this stolen election, and it didn't happen, and that's when I decided to write those 3 books. The one thing that grabs me, like you were saying about Biden sitting in his basement, too sick to even get out. You're so right. We all saw it. I kept track. I'm a former CPA, oversaw a big block of business at one time in my life, and also was an auditor. I kept a spreadsheet of Trump rallies and Biden rallies. I did it with Hillary and Trump in the prior election. Trump crushed Hillary, by the way, but he destroyed Biden. The numbers were like 1.1 million people at Trump rallies compared to less than 2,000 people at Biden's rallies. I've kept track. I got it in a spreadsheet. Nobody's ever challenged me on those numbers. And here, yet the guy with less than 2,000 people at his rallies, even with Bon Jovi at one where I think they got like 40 people. I think that was it. Bon Jovi did one and never did any more. I think it just was. It was impossible that senile old guy in his basement with circles on the floor at his rallies that couldn't even get 2,000 people. Somehow got 80 million votes to upset one of the most popular presidents in 2020 in U.S. history, with the most votes ever, legitimate votes ever in U.S. history up to that time. So, it was insane.
The anecdotal evidence of a Trump victory is overwhelming. Of course, the mainstream media, led by CNN and MSNBC. By the way, MSNBC thinks they can now fool people. They're changing their name to MS Now. But it's the same old BS. It has no credibility. I don't get my news from MSNBC for the same reason I don't eat out of the toilet. Nothing they tell you is true. They were the leaders in disparaging anyone who questioned the election. And as I unfortunately correctly predicted after the 2020 election, they were going to declare it a crime if somebody exercised their First Amendment right to question the elections. They tried to make that a criminal offense to try to cover up the greatest steal in American history. But I'm greatly encouraged by the fact that the Department of Justice has now sent formal inquiries to election offices around the country demanding access to voting machines, cybersecurity protocols, and access to voter rolls. It looks to me like the Department of Justice is very seriously examining the 2020 election in their efforts to identify crime. Tulsi Gabbard has already told us that she is going to declassify more documents that prove that there was a seditious conspiracy to steal the 2020 election. So just as the criminal cabal around Barack Obama has been exposed in the Russian collusion hoax, the greatest single dirty trick in American political history, the greatest single abuse of power in our history, I think the 2020 election is yet going to be exposed. I highly recommend to people your 3-book collection on the steal. You can get it by going to joehoft.com. That's Joe Hoft, HOFT.com. I have not only read all 3 volumes, I've also gifted it to a number of my liberal friends who refuse to believe that the election of 2020 could possibly have rigged. But I like the way you broke this down, because you correctly point out that there are 3 stages here. After months of preparation and pandering, the 2020 election finally arrived. November 3rd, 2020. But what led up to that election is just as important as the election itself. First of all, the fact that President Trump's campaign style of these enormous rallies with huge turnouts, which, by the way, no one in political history has ever been able to do that. I worked for the great Ronald Reagan. We still had to have advanced men beat the bushes to turn out big crowds. Donald Trump is a force of nature. We've never seen anything like it, and we never will. But his campaign style was hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic restrictions, requiring people to stay home, preventing people from gathering in large spaces, requiring people to wear masks. This very specifically, I think, threw the president off of his rhythm. And if you look at the poll numbers, you will see as soon as those restrictions were ended and the president hit the road, he began to climb in all of the polls. Joe, what say you?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, I did tallies of both 2016 and 2020 elections, and Trump actually had more people at his rallies in 2020, even despite all these barriers and challenges in him, with COVID and stuff. So you're right. My first book was about, leading up to setting the stage, leading up to the election. First chapter, Roger, as I look back, and I'm kind of proud of this now, is I wrote on the deep state, and I wrote about this guy who I didn't know much about then, and who I'd heard mentioned on Tucker Carlson's show when Darren Beatty from Revolver was on there. And maybe you remember that. He talked about Norm Eisen and color revolutions. And that really struck me because he's saying, this is what's going on here. And we're like, what? And so I wrote that down in my book. And then what I noticed is after the election, after it was stolen, a couple months after, or a month even after Biden was in office in the White House, Time Magazine came out with this famous article where they praised the people that basically stole the election. They said they were heroes for based on their rationale that it's okay to overthrow an election in the U.S. if you don't like a candidate. And the first person they interviewed was Norm Eisen, and the first person they quoted. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And so that was really my first chapter leading into what led up to the election. And President Trump, I sent him a copy of that book. He sent me a nice note back, Roger, in about 2022. In the heat of all this, nobody, the media is pushing real hard that January 6ers were insurrectionists. The election was free and fair, and President Trump's a criminal for saying what he was saying. And thank God he's got more guts than anybody we've seen maybe in modern history, where he just didn't have a problem saying, no, this thing was stolen. And despite what they said, he stood up. But he wrote me a real nice note back, and I'm really proud of that today, because there wasn't a lot of people that were standing up for him and writing about this, backing it up with evidence. With my background, as I mentioned earlier, it was just really absolutely, there was no doubt in my mind as I went through that. And then the second book was on what actually happened. And every single chapter that I discuss was major material issues that a bona fide auditor of integrity would never have signed off on that election. I'm not sure if you saw my point in Vegas where I shared. I believe Andrew Weissman, that snake of a person. I believe that he had a lot to do to impact our 2020 election. And the reason is I'm saying that is because in early 2000s, he ended up with Christopher Wray and Robert Mueller. They indicted a company called Arthur Andersen. It was a huge accounting firm full of integrity. And the company, went under the next day. It was done. You can't have an auditing firm that's being indicted by the DOJ. And they had 80-some thousand people that lost their jobs around the world. I've talked to somebody in Japan who lost his job through that debacle. And years later, it went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, they didn't commit. That's not a crime even that you're mentioning, Mr. Weissman. But the company was gone. And so in 2020, when we needed really good auditors of integrity from these big four firms now, it's the big four instead of the big five, what happened is nobody was raising their hand. None of these firms were saying, hey, we're going to step in and we're going to look at this and we'll give you a proper answer. Nobody did that because I think, because they were threatened by what happened, almost 20 years prior, where Arthur Andersen went under. Yeah, and none of these firms, they felt like probably it'd be their death, that'd be into their company if they stood up and said the truth that these elections were stolen.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that Andrew Weissmann still points to the Enron case, which took down both Enron and Arthur Andersen, as his crowning achievement. With all due respect, he was not only overturned 9-0 by the U.S. Supreme Court, but he was also accused of prosecutorial misconduct. This is a man who got his start covering up mob murders in Brooklyn, moved on to the destruction of Enron and Arthur Andersen, and then was in the middle of the Russian collusion hoax. He's also the guy that I now know, based on the fact that CNN texted a copy of my sealed indictment to my attorney minutes after I was arrested, which had no court markings on it. But when you look at the metadata tags on that document, you have the initials of the man who wrote it. Therefore, the man who illegally leaked it. That would be Andrew Weissmann. He's within the sound of my voice, but if I were him, I'd be lawyering up, because the bloom is off the rose. This is no longer conjecture or just great investigative reporting by people like Paul Sperry or Lee Smith or Jonathan Solomon. This is now stone cold fact. Proven by the declassified documents put forward by Tulsi Gabbard. There was a seditious conspiracy to commit treason and undo a duly elected president and overturn an election. We're going to continue our conversation with Joe Hoft when we come back, so please, whatever you do, don't touch that dial. Stay in the zone.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
And we're back in the zone. Joining us in the zone today is Joe Hoft. You can find him at joehoft.com. He's written a terrific 3-volume set of books on the 2020 election. Takes your breath away. You can get those by going to joehoft.com. That's H-O-F-T, Joe Hoft, Joehoft.com. I strongly and highly recommend these terrific books to you if you want to know what really happened in the 2020 election. Joe, the Missouri Secretary of State, Denny Hoskins, held a public demonstration on how a hand count would work, showing that it would not be complicated and it would be relatively easy to accomplish. It seems to me that of all the excuses against hand counting, they're virtually all thinly veiled propaganda from people who just want to cheat. We've only got about 3 minutes here, but how do we dispel the lies from people who oppose paper ballots and an honest hand count?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess the obvious is, and, if you read my books, and thanks for mentioning them, the current elections are uncertifiable in every area I looked at. I feel like I'm a pretty good expert in this arena because I've done audits around the world, literally, even in communist China. So I know what I'm talking about with audits. I've done multi-million-dollar fraud audits in Japan. Our elections are not certifiable on every count. These systems are broke. There's security issues. You don't use the system with security issues in the corporate world. You shut it down, and you shut it down right now. You can't afford to have somebody sneaking in, stealing your information or inserting information into your system. So that's the kind of weakness that we have in our current system process. Our election process. We have to get rid of the systems. The way that we did elections for centuries was just the way that you just mentioned, the paper ballot process, and it worked really well. There's always going to be some cheaters around, especially I think in big cities where people names are made up or whatever. We got to manage that through adequate voter rolls and et cetera. But we cannot go on with this process, and we've got to change it. Paper ballots works, and I talked to a young lady in Italy, and she says they do their elections paper ballots. You walk into a local precinct where you provide an ID. They have your record there. They check you off. They give you the ballots. You go fill them out. You drop them off, and you walk out and get your ID back. And they stamp a booklet actually that you have. It's like an election passport, and leave. And they have the election results in hours after the elections are closed. And it's at least twice the size of California, and they can do it that night. So it's not hard. It's being done around the world, like in countries like Italy. It makes all the sense in the world. And a couple things too is the further the distance between when a ballot is processed and when it reaches somebody, the higher the risk. Same with the distance issue. This eliminates all that by just doing elections in a local precinct.
All right, we have to wrap it up there. I want to thank our guest, Joe Hoft. Go to joehoft.com to get his great books. Joe Hoft, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?